We like to imagine progress as a straight line, a march towards something better, fairer, more unified. We tell ourselves that with enough time, enough knowledge, and enough goodwill, peace becomes inevitable. But what if that's the lie we need to believe just to keep moving forward? Because sometimes the more we chase perfection, the more fragile it becomes. And sometimes the system we built to create harmony are the very thing that fractures it. The ideal of peace can be weaponized. Unity, misused. And utopia? Well, utopia might just be the most dangerous solution of all. Some stories don't let us look away from that. Some stories takes the pristine surface of progress and peels it back, revealing the chaos, the compromise, and the cost beneath it. The Orville is one of those series. In this world, utopia isn't a destination, it's a negotiation. Peace isn't gifted, it's enforced. And the pursuit of moral idealism becomes a burden no civilization can carry without cracking. So let's confront the future the Orville refuses to romanticize, and the price it makes us pay for believing in utopia. Chapter 1: The Illusion of Utopia in Space. Utopia is a concept we're all chasing, that single belief that there is something greater somewhere, a place where paradise can be found. In the near future, perhaps we can achieve that. The time in which the Orville takes place certainly draws that distinction. This sense of planetary union across planets and races creates an interesting parallel. Has the elusive dream of utopia truly been realized by then? The series suggests it has, at least in some capacity. Yet the moral obligation of the Planetary Union to patrol space and shape it into a utopian vision is precisely why it can never truly be one. Every race holds its own unique cultures, and trying to unify them under one umbrella leads to inevitable conflicts. What starts as a pursuit of utopia distorts into a compromised form of galactic governance, built on the belief that unity makes them stronger. And while that may be true in some ways, in others, it becomes a deeply flawed assumption. In this future, hierarchy becomes the new currency. With synthesizers capable of creating anything, money becomes obsolete. As a result, the motivation once tied to material wealth shifts towards climbing social ranks and seeking recognition. This system presents the illusion of order and opportunity, but ultimately, it brings the very idea of utopia into question. Though there may be a sense of calm and control unlike anything in the present, it is still an anachronism to the idea of utopia. This is not a paradise, because paradise, in the truest sense, cannot exist. Each time the Planetary Union expands or makes contact with new planets, eager to expose them to the truth of galactic civilization, it adds instability to an already fragile structure. It's like a towering game of Jenga on the verge of collapse. But those at the top, blinded by the belief in utopia, fails to see it. Chapter 2: The Fragility of Idealism. The Planetary Union upholds the entitled ideals of good for everything, projecting those ideals onto everyone in hopes that they meet the same standards. However, that feeling is not universally shared within the Union. Many races have their own cultures, their own ways of doing things, and being told to stop practicing those cultures is like telling someone so deeply indoctrinated into a belief system that they cannot even begin to see an alternate perspective. That is sadly the foundation upon which the Planetary Union is built. Time and time again, even as diverse races work together aboard the ship, they're forced into the role of mediators, tasked with containing the very ideals the Union was founded upon. The moral guide they follow exists to ensure that they themselves are not crossing any lines, but that responsibility is often a burden rather than a beacon. This becomes the true battle the Orville faces. It's not the space fights against the Krill or the Kalons. It's not just about exploring strange spatial anomalies. It's the constant pressure to uphold an idealism that simply cannot be replicated in every corner of the galaxy. Culture, after all, can be a very difficult battle. The Union presents tolerance as a cost of peace, the necessary compromise required to keep radically different cultures aligned under a single banner. But tolerance is never neutral. It always has a limit, and those limits reveal themselves not in philosophy, but in the violence institutions are willing to excuse. Nowhere is this clearer than the Union's relationship with the Mocklans. In the name of cultural autonomy and political necessity, the Union looks away as an entire sex is erased, not metaphorically, but surgically. Female Mocklans are hunted, kidnapped, and forcibly regendered, their existence framed as defect rather than a life. Protests are filed, objections are raised, and still, nothing changes. The justification is always the same. The Mocklans are essential. They're the Union's primary weapon manufacturers, its foremost defense experts. Peace, we're told, has a price, and that price is paid by those deemed inconvenient enough to sacrifice. And that often becomes the root of all disagreements. And when these cultures are armed with advanced weaponry and centuries of tradition, it becomes a volatile situation for anyone or anything caught in the middle. But that pursuit of idealism is what makes the series worth a deeper look. No one on the Orville is so indoctrinated into a specific belief that it shuts down all arguments. Instead, they're willing to have the difficult conversations, the disagreements, the debates with other cultures, not necessarily to agree, but to acknowledge and respect the differences. The hope is to find compromises, to shift perceptions, to educate, and ultimately to make real changes within an entitled vision. That effort is all we can do to ensure that the power of idealism never reaches a boiling point from which there is no return. Chapter 3: Humans, Aliens, and Machines, and the Right to Exist. Races, races, and races. That is what defines the Orville, a galaxy full of different races with cultures that comes together. And sometimes there are cultures that cannot be fully accepted into this unified cultural belief, leading to all-out war. That is the cost of trying to bring peace to the galaxy. In a sense, it's a much deeper and more complex allegory for what the world leaders face when managing cultural differences within and beyond their borders. But in this case, it's not just a country, it's an entire planet. The Orville explores that theme. Whether humans, Mocklans, Saleans, Krill, or even the Kalons, all are races and even machines that contribute to the narrative, which challenges viewers to question what is ultimately right. The show examines each culture and religion and the tension that arises when one is expected to be subjugated under another. While the Planetary Union shows that some races can coexist under one moral idea, others simply cannot fit into that framework. The core conflict becomes the complexity of that realization, that many cultures cannot be neatly placed into a single circle of moral supremacy. This leads to escalating wars, from the Union's ongoing conflict with the Krill to the destructive war against the Kalons, who believed all biological life should be eradicated, and finally to the new war left unresolved in the series, an alliance between the Mocklans and the Krill, challenging the Union's so-called moral right. These are the real battles, the moral dilemmas. Should we accept all cultures and practices, no matter how dark they may be? Should we tolerate a religion that encourages killing outsiders? Or machines so mistreated that they come to see all biological life as inherently evil? These are no longer black and white conflicts, they're battles in the gray. And the Orville doesn't let us look away. The narrative doesn't offer us an easy out, it forces the audience to confront these questions. It challenges us to examine our support for the protagonist, the Planetary Union, and especially the crew of the Orville. But it also asks us to flip the coin, to see the other side, not to judge the opposing forces solely through the lens the series provides, but to find the courage to question everything. Chapter 4: The Burden of Command. What does it mean to be a commander, the one who is leading everything, the one who has to make a choice that won't just affect your own life, but the lives of your entire crew, the entire galaxy? That is what the Orville asks. When Ed Mercer was given the chance to be the captain of the Orville, it meant responsibilities. It meant paying for everything he had learned, the high-achieving reputations, the mistakes, and the darkest times he had to go through, all of it channeled into commanding the ship. That burden of being in command forced him to make difficult choices. It made him face the greatest threats, chasing across the galaxies and having to find a way to keep his crew safe and moving forward. That was the struggle Ed faced. But it wasn't just him who was faced with those choices. It was anyone who sat in the command seat, Whether on the Orville, when Egg gives the command to his next in rank, or someone above the fleet of the Orville and beyond. Anyone in a position of power carries the same weight. Power can be the most honest thing, and it can be corrupted just as easily as it can be rewarding. The power to balance that scales, meaning responsibility, rests in your hand. It can feel as soft as a marshmallow or as hard as tungsten. That's what it means to be in the seat of the command. It doesn't ask if you're ready to take on the mantle. It just have you do it. Some are naturally better than others, exceptional in navigating the cold waters of leadership, politics, or something else entirely. But then there are those who aren't ready, who are forced into it. And for them, that moment becomes defining. A mark that will be remembered forever. Anyone can be thrusted into that responsibility, whether in space or otherwise. Chapter 5. Love, Loneliness, and the Search for Meaning. The journey the Orville takes on their grand adventure across space can also become lonely. Yes, you're on a spaceship full of fellow crews and passengers, which makes meeting people almost inevitable. But at the same time, those on board the Orville are people who are also searching for something in their lives, a purpose, a meaning, or just love. Being on board a vessel like the Orville means exploring the outer edges of galaxy, discovering new species, and having new experiences on a day-to-day basis. But it's the quiet moments. It's the time between those experiences when the real gut punch of emotions comes into play. Those are the times when people on board begin to question who they really are. They're forced to go deep within themselves, searching for a meaning they haven't yet found. Perhaps because, in some ways, they ran away. They ran to the outer edges of space, hoping the answers they were seeking would be out there. That's what makes each character's journey so compelling. Even though they have each other, sharing both triumph and loss as a crew member, they're still individuals with unique lives, lives that can't simply be replaced. And within each of them lingers a deep personal question. What do you really want? As the crew meet people from planets far across the galaxies, they're forced to confront the very truth that once made them flee into space. The desire to climb the ladder wasn't just about prestige or hierarchical success. It came from something else, something they never wanted to face. Instead, they bury themselves in duty, in the idea that the past, present, and future are all bound by work. But with that came imbalance. No space was left to seek the meaning everyone quietly longed for. And so they make the excuse, the moral duty outweighs personal reflection. Yet the truth is, that's an oversimplification of life, one that can't be put on hold forever, even in the name of duty. Chapter 6. The Question to the Next. Who decides what better looks like? When the galaxy unites as one, when many forms of being become a group to forge what the next chapter of the galaxy should look like, it then becomes a moral question of idealism, asking who should be best fit to decide what that even looks like. The notion of better for the common good will always mean there is a losing side, a side that will refuse to acclimate to the changes put forth and will rival the union that has been forged to oppose it. Those same ideals that were built so long ago for the Planetary Union to form have brought forth many alien life forms to unite as one, sharing an understanding of cultural acceptance while also knowing the moral obligation that comes with it. And as we wait for the next season of the Orville to come, that question is now more important than ever. For the past 3 seasons, the series is built towards an inevitable crossing of ideal lines the planetary abides by, introducing it to so many planets as possible and inviting them to join the fight. Yet the series has shown time and time again the grave danger that comes with that line of idealism, knowing there are alien races in the galaxies with different cultural practices and values that makes coexistence impossible. When that moment arrives, there is an inevitable choice to fight. That sense of moral idealism is only as strong as its word. Even if there are those in the fleet who see and abide by the code, there is also an ignorance built into it as well. In order for the galaxy to find peace, the series places a heavy iron pedestal on the morality that cannot be reached without conflict. The hierarchical order of the Planetary Union, the notion that because there is no longer monetary value, individuals now work for value of meaning, has polluted the very idealism within the system they serve under. In that tension lies an impossible thread to navigate. The question of what is truly better becomes an unavoidable gray zone that no one wants to touch, nor should they, because in the end, there will always be a loser, and that is something that must be accepted. That feeling of compromise, of diplomacy as a solution, almost feels like a sorrowful excuse buried within an ideal notion that cannot be fully protected. Everyone across the galaxy is different. They have their own cultures, their own stage of technological advancement, and, most importantly, an ignorance of each other's fortitude of culture and life. In the end, the Orville reminds us that no matter how noble the ideal, someone will always be left standing on the losing side of progress, and that truth may be the most honest part of its universe.